Hello again. Chris Lee of Southeastern 14 here with my friend Stuart Lackey. We're going to talk Kentucky football as we do every week. Beautiful day outside, and I guess it's a beautiful day for the Wildcats. It's not always been pretty, but 4-0, and that's where you want to be this time of the year, right?
Absolutely. Chris, thanks for having me back. Yeah, Cats start 4-0 for the third consecutive year under Mark Stoops. That's the first time that's happened since 1911, believe it or not.
Yeah, no, that is hard to believe, given some of the Septembers that Stoops has had. But Saturday certainly started well. You and I were both in attendance in our hometown of Nashville for Kentucky's win over Vanderbilt, which wasn't always pretty for either side. But Kentucky, bottom line, Kentucky gets out, was it 21-0 in the first 13 and a half minutes, and really from that point on. I guess say Kentucky was never threatened. There was a brief point, I guess, maybe early in the third quarter, but Kentucky answered the bell pretty quickly and went on to what was a pretty easy win over Vanderbilt in Nashville.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about different aspects of the game. But, yeah, Kentucky only one of three teams now undefeated in the SEC after 4 weeks of play, Chris, Missouri and Georgia, the other two. And, if I told you that stat, along with the Cats averaging 36 points per game, and they've won all their games by double digits, and they're 3-1 against the spread, you'd say without maybe watching any of those games, it's like, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
But certainly a lot to peel back, especially on offense. But yeah, how impressive was that Kentucky defense on Saturday against Vanderbilt? Contributing to that 21-0 start. And yeah, it looked like Kentucky had finally figured it out and put together a complete game as the first quarter unfolded.
Yeah, Stuart, I was there in the press box, and I thought Vanderbilt certainly gift wrapped some scores for Kentucky a little bit. But one way to get an opponent to gift wrap some things is to get pressure. And I felt like Kentucky had that from the jump against A.J. Swan, who was running for his life part of the time. That first pick-six was a ball he shouldn't have thrown, but there were also two defenders near him, and he makes a throw to the far sideline. And sometimes part of playing football is just showing up and making the other guy uncomfortable and doing things he doesn't want to do, and maybe lose presence of mind for a minute. And I thought Kentucky put itself in a position to win by what it did on the defensive side early in that game.
For sure. And, we talked about last week how, A.J. Swan, really talented young quarterback for Vanderbilt, in the receiving core that Vanderbilt has this year in terms of what they've been able to accomplish so far. And Kentucky held Swan fairly much in check the whole game. I think 16 of 40 for 188 yards. And I would say a chunk of that was kind of, towards the end of the game. But Kentucky forced 3 interceptions, and sack Swan, I think, got to him one time. But, yeah, put a lot of pressure. And, again, we talk about these names I've been calling off since we started, 4 weeks ago, Chris. Octavius Oxendine, Deion Walker, Darian Henry Young, the kid from North Carolina, Silver. All these guys are making pressure. And let me give you a kind of a comparison. In years past, Brad White's had a lot of talented defenders play for Kentucky over his time there. But this might be the most complete defensive front and talented defensive front across the board that he's had at Kentucky, to the point where the Cats are rushing 3 with some of those hosses up front, and they're able to get double teams and create pressure with fewer players, which is putting that pressure and forcing that pressure issue on the quarterback, having to maybe throw an errant pass like Swan did a couple of times on Saturday. And that forces or allows the cornerbacks, and at least in that first one, to not be on an island for so long where they can make that kind of play, right? So, yeah, really complimentary football on that side of that side for Kentucky.
Well, when I looked at the box score after the game, I kept thinking this has got to be a misprint, right? Because I think Kentucky only had maybe 1 sack, which didn't feel right, because it felt like they were in A.J. Swan's face with 2 guys. Constantly. And again, that forced some big mistakes. The one that Swan threw, for the first pick, never should have been thrown. But again, that's what good defenses do. They get after you, they rattle you, they speed up your decisions, they make you make bad choices. And that set. Look, Kentucky was a little lackluster later in the day, and we can talk about some of that. But look, you're dealing with 20-year-old kids, and when you get a lead in a game you're expected to win, and again, Kentucky was up 24-0 at one point in the first half. Sometimes those things just happen. And that happens to Nick Saban on Alabama.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. And that was something that Mark Stoops, I think, talked about on the post-game show. It's like, these are kids, they were completely dialed in. I think that's probably one of the best first quarters of football that I can remember in the Mark Stoops era. It just hurt, and the intensity just relentless in all phases of the game. And so, yeah, I mean, these are kids. They're going to maybe lose attention and kind of lose interest. But you can't do that at this level of football, because you saw what happened with 4.5 minutes to go in the second quarter.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the big story, Max Hairston, 2 pick sixes. I think that was the first time anybody's done that in the SEC since 2015. Was that the correct stat there, Stuart?
I think it 2015 or 2017. 2017, there was a kid from LSU that had 2 pick sixes against Ole Miss. Maybe that was the most recent, but yeah, it's definitely been a number of years since that's happened. It's the first time in UK history that's ever been done. I don't think any SEC players has ever returned more than 2 in one game, right? That would be a tall order. But I mean, Hairston, a ton of tackles through, 23 tackles through 4 games. I think he had maybe 3 tackles for loss on Saturday, 2 pick sixes. His coverage on the Vanderbilt receivers on his side of the football or field, really strong. And that was complimented by Andrew Phillips, the other Kentucky corner, who I thought really did a nice job as well.
Yeah, Vanderbilt has 3 receivers that you got to watch out for: McGowan, Shepard, and Humphreys, and some guys after that too that can make some plays. But I think those guys had 800 and something receiving yards combined coming in.
Yeah,
Kentucky held them to 60 something. Will Shepard was a complete non-factor. Jaden McGowan didn't have a catch.
Yeah.
Nobody has shut Vanderbilt. Now, look, Vanderbilt has not played a defense like Kentucky yet, but nobody'd shut those guys down like that. And if you are Mark Stoops and you walk in the building knowing that's going to be outcome, I think you're 90-something% certain you're winning that ball game.
Well, Kentucky, those two, so Hairston and Phillips, according to Pro Football Focus, are the 2 highest graded cornerbacks in the SEC through 4 games. I think Hairston graded out at an 85.8 and Andrew Phillips at an 82. And then you add in Deion Walker, who's the SEC's highest grader interior defender with 12 pressures through 4 games, again, by Pro Football Focus. So I'm sure there's other outlets that have slightly different metrics, but there's talent across the board and depth on the Kentucky defense for sure. And it showed on Saturday.
Yeah, and heading into Florida, which we'll get into later, Kentucky's defense is giving up 3.6 per rushing play, 4.9 per passing play, 4.4 per play period, forcing turnovers on 3% of snaps. All those numbers are elite. I get the schedule has not been loaded, but you only can play what's in front of you. You see teams across this league getting bored at times with teams they know they're going to destroy. And so hard to find a lot of fault with the defense to this point.
Yeah, again, I mean, people weren't really talking about that in the offseason, but those close to the program knew kind of what had been building through last year in the offseason and some of the transfer pieces. But Kentucky's largely, building and retaining talent on that side of the ball. And again, credit Brad White and people. I mean, the guy could have, any number of head coaching jobs, in the country, and it just loves, being a part of that program. And it's obviously a good thing for Kentucky fans. So,
Stuart, I don't know what to make of their offense at this point. They got 45 points, but 14 of those were pick sixes. I think they got more points when they got the ball at the 11 off another pick. So the defense really did the work in this one. The numbers aren't bad. 6 yards a rush play, 8.1 per pass play. Here's the problem. Turnovers are on 3.2% of the snaps. You can't win a lot of football games like that. I just walked away. Kentucky had a few big plays. You had McLean had a couple of big runs. Brown had the 55-yard catch. And then other than that, it wasn't a lot to hang your hat on. I don't know. Again, maybe you chalk some of that up to being ahead and being bored, but it was because I think the talent's there, man. We've been talking all off season about that. We like the running back room. We thought they had one of the better quarterbacks in the league, the receivers.
The tight ends.
I don't know. It's hard to make sense of what we watch sometimes.
Yeah, it does. It doesn't add up. And so, yeah, that's a great call out. So if you go down the list, balance attack, Kentucky didn't have a ton of total offense, but they had 160 yards passing, 205 yards rushing. You like, hey, that's great balance. You'd like to see a little more overall total yardage, but Davis had 78 yards on 17 carries. McLean had 64 yards and a touchdown on 6 carries. They've got the talent, but let's go back to Leary. I mean, again, 6 minutes to go in the second quarter. Kentucky's up 24 to nothing, and getting ready to add to that at first and goal at Vanderbilt's 10-yard line. They had to settle for a field goal, and there's a reason why you have to play all 30 minutes and a half. The Cats went no huddle largely in that first quarter, which Devin Leary is more comfortable in from his time at NC State. They looked crisp early on. He looked like he had command of the offense, and then they kind of just fall apart because of the same issues we've been talking about. Drops, just errant throws to nobody. And you're wondering, as you're watching this kid play quarterback, you see the talent, Chris. You see his pocket awareness. This kid can step up in the pocket. He has that awareness, and then he makes a throw that you're just kind of wondering. It's like, that's not a talent issue. Can't be. It's what's happening. So it's that kind of disconnect that you mentioned a minute ago.
Yeah, I mean, and you look at his career numbers at NC State, clearly he has got elite quarterback in him. And I think that's the thing. You can look at this a lot of different ways. You can see problems, or you can see things where, okay, this is a problem today, but I've seen the upside over here, even if it was in Raleigh. They got a lot of potential to put stuff together here, Stuart.
Yeah, and again, like you called it out, I think maybe 2 weeks ago, about just the bad offensive line play across the league. Well, Kentucky is not an exception. I mean, just horrific. And I think that's compounded some of these issues because, as I mentioned, is Leary shows great pocket awareness. It's because of that pressure on the edges. And then, something will happen. He'll make a great throw, or, somebody will make a play, and then we'll get a holding penalty. And so the offensive line, I think Kentucky on both sides of the ball had 9 penalties on Saturday for 90 yards. They're the second most penalized team in the league. You're not going to win many SEC football games if you continue to do that. You just won't.
Yeah. Well, they had enough. Someone said they played 11 offensive linemen. I haven't fact checked that. And I guess Kenneth Horsey's been out, so I don't know when they get him back. So there's still some things that need to settle, it feels like, for them.
Well, yes, and they switched off. So as I may have mentioned, so Jagger Burton had switched to center from guard this season, and Eli Cox went back to his natural position. Well, on Saturday, for most of the game, and this was at the start as well, Cox started at center. Burton moved back to his guard position, but it still didn't look clean. I think Cox will be the center moving forward. Burton will stay in place until maybe Horsey comes back and plays that position. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see kind of how the offensive line tries to tweak some things. And again, it's bad positioning. I mean, if you just watch, they're reaching a lot, which leads to those holds. Again, we'll see. Cause I wouldn't say the first 3 games were exhibition season. Vanderbilt was a much bigger step up for Kentucky, but this week you're going to find out really quickly how good or bad that offensive line really is. So
yeah, I feel like if you take the first third and the back third, and you cut out the middle third, and you're just watching Kentucky, you're like, hey, that might be a top 10 team in the country.
Yeah,
the middle third was a little different.
Yeah, it's that middle 8. I think all coaches talk about winning the middle 8, the last 4 minutes of the first half and the first 4 minutes of the second half. And it's just kind of a head scratcher. Vanderbilt actually did a pretty good job, of kind of controlling that time span. Kentucky did not. And that's what kept it, fairly close, at least for the part of the third quarter. So, I look at, the positive takeaways from the game, right? The defense obviously is playing at a high level, can improve. I think we've seen, Leary, did hit all 3 of his wide receivers that he works with and that he goes to most often. Dane Key, had, I think 4 catches for, I think maybe 60 yards, and he had that touchdown. Barryon Brown had 105 yards receiving on 4 catches. He connected with Tavion Robinson on a couple of beautiful throws. And I think that's the biggest thing is, like, you see this kid make the throws that he makes, and you're like, the talent's there. It's like, can they figure out the drops and just the miscues?
Well, and again, all these guys have a history of good play. The receiving core, the running backs, the quarterback. I mean, the offensive line might be the one thing that you got a question about. But I mean, find me a team in this league right now that's thrilled with its offensive line.
They're just not there. I mean, it's like you're seeing it in the scores, you're seeing it in the play. I mean, even Georgia, I think, they had more issues, I think, on the offensive side against South Florida UAB on Saturday. But yeah, it's just nobody's really given a wow factor in terms of their dominance on, in the run game. I mean, we can shift to Florida here in a little bit. I mean, Florida's obviously very proud of their run game, and I'm sure hopes to assert that in Lexington on Saturday.
Yeah, well, let's shift to Florida. I was about to do that. And here's some stuff that sticks out. By the way, Kentucky, a 2.5-point favorite by Vegas. The computers are all over the board. ESPN FBI has Florida the better team on a neutral field, but with the 3-point advantage, Kentucky a 1-point favorite at home. SP Plus has Kentucky 3 points better outright, which makes them a 6-point favorite by SP Plus. Sagarin's got it dead even, which makes Kentucky the favorite. So you got anywhere from Kentucky a 6-point favorite to a 1-point favorite, depending on odds makers or computers or whatever. But here's what you're going to want to watch, I think, if you are Kentucky, and it's turnovers. Florida only turning it over 1.5% of the snaps. That's excellent. And Kentucky's offense, of course, turning it over 3.2% of the time. Now, Florida's defense not forcing a lot of turnovers. Sometimes turnovers are on you. Sometimes it's on the other guy. Very interested to see where that settles. And, Florida is giving up, let's see, 3.7 yards per rush play, 5.7 per pass play. Has played a tougher schedule than most teams in the league. So Kentucky's offense really going to have to pick it up in this one.
Well, I think it's for the offense. We'll stay on that side of the ball. I mean, Kentucky has to avoid the penalties. They have to play a clean football game, and I think Leary has to manage this game. And Liam Cohen talked about in his presser yesterday after practice. Essentially, when he was here 2 years ago, there was just a lot of pitch and catch, if you will. They were easy throws, easy catches, and they allowed to get some of the receivers in space. And I think they're going to try to get back to that, to like protect the quarterback, no penalties, and manage the game. Just don't force the issue and don't force, turnovers against this defense, because, I mean, you just can't do that. I mean, it'll cost, and Kentucky won't be successful, certainly on that side of the ball.
Yeah, and Florida's defense, I mean, the Gators have played about as tough a schedule as anybody. Played Utah, played Tennessee. Yeah. It's not a big name defense. I guess Jason Marshall is the biggest name they've got on that side of the ball, the defensive back, who's a potential first-rounder. They got a 450-pounder up front on the nose, and Desmond Watson, who's a bit of a headache. But, discipline is something that you hit on. Kentucky penalized 68 yards a game. That's one of the worst marks in the league. Florida, about 33. That's one of the best marks. That was a hallmark of Billy Napier's teams a year ago. Now, it fell apart starting with that Vandy upset late in the year, but that's a team that has been really disciplined. And Kentucky's going to have to, and maybe it's just playing somebody because let's face it, Kentucky knows going in, it is supposed to win those 4 games. Yeah. And we're not dealing with adults our age. We're dealing with college kids. That stuff happens to Nick Saban's teams and Kirby Smart's teams. This one, I think, is going to be the litmus test that I'm looking for, because this is a real opponent. I'm not sure Florida's top 25 good, but I think it's good enough to tell me something about Kentucky on Saturday.
I mean, look, the Cats have won 3 out of the last 5 in this series. SEC Nation's going to be there. It's a 12 noon kick. So I think earlier than most Kentucky fans would have liked, but I think, that home field advantage will be ready. And I think it'll certainly make a difference. Florida's offense certainly has some pieces. I mean, we know about Mertz, who was one of the hottest commodities, I think, in the transfer portal in the offseason. He's got right at 1,000 yards passing, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception through 3 games. We know about Etienne, and that lineage there is a really super talented kid. And then I guess their star receiver Pearsall, maybe had the play of the year.
Oh my goodness, that was phenomenal,
unbelievable. But I think logged 362 yards on 26 receptions. So he's obviously been, a favorite of Mertz early in the season. They've got pieces, right? They may not be as elite as they've been across the board on offense, but they certainly have some talented pieces. And again, Kentucky's going to have to continue to bring that pressure and hopefully force Mertz, to throw some picks. And Kentucky's got a shot. I mean, there's a reason why they are a small favorite in the game, and I think they'll be successful. I really do. I think this defense will continue to play well, and I think that'll tell the tape. It's like how much can they pressure that Florida quarterback into maybe making a couple of mistakes and holding that run game in check.
You ever make a catch like Ricky Pearsall made?
I didn't make many catches, man. I was lucky when they threw the ball to me. So that was just physics at work and just unbelievable athletic talent. So yeah.
All right. Any parting thoughts on Kentucky football or Kentucky and Florida before we exit today?
I don't think so. Again, I feel like a record that's been repeating. It's like, can Kentucky put a complete game together? And man, it sure would be nice to limit the penalties, no turnovers, and Leary just to have a complete game. And again, I've been harping on this 70% completion percentage for, his quarterback play. If he can maintain that or exceed it, with very few mistakes, I think Kentucky's going to have a great shot to win this game. So looking forward to the action on ESPN at noon Central, or noon Eastern rather, this Saturday.
Yeah, so am I. And look, we cover the SEC here. I know you're only part of our Kentucky end of things, but we have this conversation. I don't know that anybody's completely happy and feels like its team has given an A effort every week, or maybe sometimes the effort's been an A, but the results haven't been quite up to SEC standards. I feel like everybody's in this boat. I feel like we're going into a last 7-8 weeks of the season. They're going to be fascinating because I think you're going to see some surprises in the league going forward. And I'm here for it.
Well, I'm here for the party. No, I think part of it too is that we are still understanding the impact of the transfer portal on a lot of things. And I think this is a part of it too. Again, you hear these great things in the offseason, and I think everyone, either as an analyst or a fan, expects, well, these kids should be playing at a high level. A lot of them have never played together, and they're talented, but it's, gelling in 6 months as opposed to playing at a high level in 6 months those are two completely different things. And so I think you're starting to see these teams will start to come together, but they just haven't had many reps. I mean, I'm talking specifically about Leary. You'll notice even late in the game, Stoops still played him because they're just needing reps, and that sounds kind of crazy with your star quarterback, but they need reps, and so I think you're seeing a lot of that across the league that might contribute to some of this inconsistency.
All right, I'm going to make a prediction. When we do this show this time next week, we're talking unbeaten Georgia and unbeaten Kentucky meeting. What do you say to that?
I'm absolutely down for that. I think we will be. And again, SEC Nation coming to Lexington for their broadcast, and I think there were some hopes that game day would be in Athens next week, but I think that's already been spoken for as well. But yeah, certainly that would be a great interview and a great discussion to have with the Cats and the Dogs, both undefeated, heading into next Saturday.
All right, Stuart, it's been fun. CHOMPS is one of the sponsors of our podcast. You can see their logo in the upper right-hand corner. That was not to taunt Kentucky fans. That's just how the ball bounces.
Sure it wasn't.
Right. But if you would like to partner, and Kentucky fans, we can put your logo over, or a different spot competing with CHOMPS or something here. But we're always looking for advertisers. So check out that scrolling banner below with the way to reach out to us. Stuart, it's been fun as always, and we'll catch you next week.
Thank you, my friend. Talk soon.
All right. I'm Chris Lee of Southeastern 14. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon with more SEC football content.